So here we are, halfway through the week, just a few days before Good Friday and just a few more days after that from the anticipated Easter Sunday. And as we come into a week like this, I think we ask the question, so what is it that we're really hoping to get out of this week? What are we really hoping to get out of these services that are coming up? Are we looking to just remember? Are we looking just to make sure we attended the specific service, the special service for celebrating Easter? As we come into today, we come into a story we find in John chapter 12. And we're going to join in this story with those that were actually walking with Jesus, those who were witnessing what he had done, what he said, not just his teachings. They got to just see Jesus for who he was every day of his life. And as we come into this story, we're going to see who they were, how they saw Jesus, even how they loved him. In John chapter 12, we see that Jesus came to a home in a city named Bethany, and probably into a neighborhood just like this one. We're walking through the neighborhood actually that I live in. And what he did, and just like what's happened in my house many times, Jesus came together to have dinner with some of his close friends, those that he did life with, those that he walked with, those that witnessed who he was and what he said and all that he taught and did. And as they sat down that night, they sat down for dinner. And I'm sure they were planning just for a normal night of dinner, hanging out, just talking about life, telling stories about what they experienced and seen. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of dinner, something completely unexpected happened. All of a sudden, this woman comes in. And this definitely was not planned, and she was very likely not even invited to this dinner party. And as she came in, she came down, she sat at Jesus' feet. She took some very, very expensive perfume and she poured it on Jesus' feet, and she began to wash his feet with this perfume and with her hair. And it says that she began to wash Jesus' feet, that those around that were watching this seemed to have a lot of different responses. And some of them started to grumble and even complain. In fact, one of them, Judas, one of Jesus' disciples, even began to even condemn her and say, how could she have done this? Why wasn't the money used instead of for the perfume, but the perfume sold and used and given to the poor? But Jesus had a much different response to what she was doing. He turned around and he looked at those that were witnessing what was taking place, and he spoke of her and he said, what she has done is a beautiful thing. He said that she's even preparing him for his burial. And then he said this, he said, and whenever the good news is preached, the gospel is preached, the good news that Jesus came to bring, whenever that's preached, he said at the same time, her story is going to be told as a memorial to what she did to Jesus that night. She was willing to come because she had experienced the love and forgiveness that Jesus offered her like no one else had ever offered her in her life. As she came to him that night, she was willing to come despite the glares that she was going to get, despite the murmuring that people were going to say, despite the way people might even were going to talk about her in the neighborhood that witnessed it and talk about her behind her back. Despite all of that, she was willing to come. And she came knowing she wasn't even really wanted. In fact, she was a woman of brokenness. She was a woman that had been rejected by her neighbors because of her sin. In fact, her neighbors most likely would not have even wanted her to be walking down their streets just like this because of who she was and what she was known for. But despite of all of that, she came. And the reason that she came is because of how much she loved Jesus. See, even though she was broken, even though she knew her own sin, even though she knew all the bad stuff that people said about her, she also knew how much Jesus loved her. She knew the invitation that Jesus actually was giving her to be willing to come to him and be willing to say, if you're willing to forsake this sin and turn away, then I am ready here to embrace you and love you and bring you into my family. And that's who Jesus was. And that's who Mary witnessed him to be, and why she was so confident as she came that night to worship at his feet, as she washed his feet in front of all those there. When you think about it, Mary really did this not for any show, not because of what people would see her do, but just because of her love for him. And in a similar way, we're in a really similar situation right now, because this year we're going to experience Easter like we've never experienced it before. Nothing's going to be as we have traditionally experienced it, especially if you've been in the church or been a Christian for a lot of years, because this year we don't have any of that peer pressure. We're not even able to go to church on Sunday morning. No one's going to look to make sure we're there. No one's going to see how we were dressed. No one's going to know whether we worshiped this Easter or not. In fact, the only thing left to motivate us is the same thing that motivated Mary. Do we love him? Is this important to us because of our love for him? You know, in times like this, I don't know about you, but I actually struggle more. It's harder when we don't have the routines, when we don't have the things that kind of keep us going with our patterns, keep us going with what we're used to, and we kind of lose some of that consistency, and we tend to break away from things. And it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to lose our focus. It's easy to sometimes maybe even be like some of those who are watching Mary do this and begin to even lose focus on really what she was doing and why, and we get distracted with all these other things that seem to start popping in our head. That's hard for me. I easily fall into that when I lose routines like this, but I want to encourage you as you're preparing in just a few days for Good Friday, as you're preparing for a few days after that into Easter, to be willing to consider what it might be like to come like Mary came. To come not because of any peer pressure, but instead to invite Jesus into your home. To invite Jesus to come meet with you because you love him. Invite Jesus in not because anybody else will know, but because you really want him there. And we do this because it says he first loved us. The same thing that Mary witnessed in Jesus' love for her and her brokenness is what we get to experience. We witness the same thing in God's love for us. And so this Easter, on Good Friday, in this whole week, I just want to encourage you to come because you love him, to pour yourself out for him, to him, just like Mary did, to put your heart out to him, to love him and worship him because he first loved us.